This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com.
Happen in the world of professional wrestling the way they happened in the primary universe. Welcome to this month's episode of Through the Looking Glass. I am your co-host, Scott Criscuolo. Happy February, everybody. I hope it is mild and comfortable wherever you are in the world. I know that my co-host is very mild. It is actually not too bad here because a year ago when we were doing our episodes, it was about 90 degrees difference between where he lived and where I live. It is not as bad now. I bet you the gap is within 30 degrees, which is pretty good for February. Let me bring him in. He is the Thunder from Down Under. And yes, for the second consecutive year, his San Francisco 49ers ended my season. But sadly, both our seasons ended the same way with losses. Good evening, Dave Hall. How are you?
Hey, Scott, I'm doing well. I've recovered from the disappointment of having to play no quarterback in a championship game.
They're going to call you in by the fifth straight.
Well, I was warming up. I had my jersey on. I was warming up, but they just weren't willing to fork out the overseas fare. So no, it's been a good month. February. I'll tell you what, down here, we're at the back end of summer, but it has hit with an absolute fury in the past couple of weeks. So it's not too bad today. We're about 80 degrees your temperature today, but on Saturday we hit 100. So we had a real scorcher of a day. I was visiting my parents on Saturday, and it was 38 Celsius, and that's 100 degrees. So Yikes. It was a pretty warm day. So
okay, all right, so we're not 30 degrees apart. I was thrilled yesterday when the temp hit 52 here. So I was very thrilled. But
as I said, it's about 80 today. So it's not bad. It's a nice day. So
not bad. Well, Dave, it's always a pleasure. Our show continues to do great things here on the PTB Wrestling Network, and we thank you, our listeners. Thank you so much for your support, both with this, of course, with this show and all the other shows here on the network, and of course our other feeds here on the Quadapods. Of course, the PTB Pop Experience, the No So, and the Jenny Position. Of course, Dave is on the No So from time to time as well. This month, tonight, we're going to. This is a topic This is also official. What I always say is Dave, of course, is the brains behind the Brawn. He does a lot of the research and picks our awesome topics. I pretty much blabber and edit. It's pretty much all I do. It's the two things I'm good at: talking and editing. That's what I do well. But some of the topics Dave and I had to chew on a little bit. Others are fish in a barrel. This episode is totally fish in a barrel because this month we're going to talk about a guy. Well, we talked about his Mid-South tag team partner several episodes ago. So this month we'll talk about him. And for the first time in Through the Looking Glass history, we're going to open multiple. We're going to be totally messing stuff up. We're going to be opening multiple alternate universes at different points in history. Dave, why don't you set the table for us? What do we have tonight?
Well, it's very interesting. As we record today, we are 12 years and 2 days shy of a pretty infamous little time period in WWE history. So in 2011, in February 2011, some vignettes started to appear on screen, and they were in reality they were promoting the return of The Undertaker to prepare for his annual WrestleMania return and WrestleMania battle.
Right.
But at the time, the rumor mill went absolutely haywire because a lot of people and a lot of insiders believed that the vignettes and the video clips were actually touting the arrival of the man who had been the franchise of WCW for so long, a man who many people thought would never step foot in the WWE, a man they call Sting.
Yes. Yep.
So we are recording. So the videos were hyping the return being 2/22/11, obviously 22nd of February 2011. As I said, as we record this and as this drops, that is essentially 12 years ago. And I remember it so distinctly because not only was the rumor mill, I mean, it wasn't just a couple of people. It was Meltzer. It was all the internet sites. Everyone was touting that Sting had signed with WWE, and this was bolstered by the fact that his contract with TNA had actually lapsed, and he was still in negotiations with TNA. So there was a lot of potential that this could be a reality. And so we're going to look today at not just 2011 and what might have happened if Sting came in, but we're going to look at multiple occasions where the rumors were out there or potential that Sting could have come to the WWE. Now, of course, Sting did finally make it to the WWE. Famously, now I'm having a mental blank. Survivor Series, what year was it? When did he make the return? When did he make the appearance?
2014.
Survivor Series. 2014. So
Survivor Series 2014. Yep.
Yes. So Survivor Series 2014, Sting had that very famous debut, appearing at the end of the Survivor Series match and attacking Triple H, beginning the build and quite a good build to a match that he and Triple H would have at WrestleMania the following year. So we're going to have a bit of a look at Sting today and who he was. And I guess, as always, it's always good to sort of memories. And I remember my first memory of Sting, as I've shared multiple times, we really didn't get NWA, WCW down here in Australia. So my first introduction to Sting was through the Actor Mags, PWI, and specifically it was the August 1988 Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, which basically gave the overview, the summary, the results of the original Clash of Champions card, where Sting went 45 minutes with the Nature Boy himself, Ric Flair. That was my first introduction to Sting. And over the course of the following couple of years, some WCW videos became available here in Australia, and I got to see Sting in ring. Predominantly 1989 was the first time I really saw him in ring, and his union with Flair, the aforementioned Flair, and his battles with the Great Muta, which they were some fantastic matches back in '89 for a young Sting, and obviously building to his championship win in 1990. So that was how I got to know Sting, mainly through the Actor Mags, with sort of 89, 90 VHS watching coming to the forefront. What about you, Scott? How did you first get an introduction to Sting, and what were your early memories?
Well, I remember renting, because I didn't watch it live. I remember renting the Starrcade 87 tape. And if you remember, for those listening, remember back then, Turner used to chop the crap out of their VHS tapes. But I do remember that he was in the opener, which I'm pretty sure was on the tape, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but I think I'm not. He was a heel, if I remember correctly. I think. Might have been a babyface. No, he's probably a babyface. Jimmy Garvin, Michael Hayes, and Sting. I'm pretty sure, but yeah, because I'm watching one of my chrono watches. I'm right now in August of '87 in their faces. So he was on the babyface six-man team of Jimmy Garvin, Michael Hayes, and they took on the team of Eddie Gilbert, Larry Zbyszko, and Rick Steiner. And that match ended in a draw. I'm pretty sure that that match was on the tape. If not, maybe I watched it maybe they put it on like one of the Cindy's. Pretty sure it was on the tape, though. I'll have to ask Sean Kidd. He would probably know. But the first time, and to me, he was just, there's just some dude. Obviously, most of Starrcade 87 was, most of the guys were UWF displants, because obviously Bill Watts' UWF promotion was folded up into Crockett. But obviously, the match that I first saw Sting shine is the one you mentioned, Dave, that they talked about in the mags, because I watched. I taped it in another room. I was at my friend's house on April 27th, 1988, watching WrestleMania 4. Meanwhile, my brother, my oldest brother, who was he was obviously he was in his bedroom. He wasn't home, and I asked him, "Can you do me a favor?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Can you tape for me? You're not going to be home tonight." He goes, "No, I think my brother bowled or whatever." And he said, "I'm not going to be home tonight." I said, "Good. Do you mind if I schedule Clash of the Champions 1 to record on your VCR?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." "What time's that?" I said, "I think it's 8 o'clock and it goes until I think 10. He goes, "That's fine." So I was at my friend's house watching WrestleMania 4 live, and at home on VHS in my brother's bedroom, we were taping Clash of the Champions 1. So the next day, when I got home from school, I was a freshman in high school. I got home and I threw the tape in, and I watched this very interesting match between Sting and our world's heavyweight champion, the GOAT, the real GOAT, of course, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. And it was a very strange match because, please feel free to hop in with your thoughts when you first saw it. But this is a match because at this time in the previous 3 years when Flair was feuding with Dusty, and then up until the car accident, he was feuding with Magnum, and then he feuded with Nikita, and then he feuded with Ronnie Garvin. And he actually, not many people remember this, in the middle of '87, he was feuding with Jimmy Garvin. So he was feuding with the whole Garvin family in 1987. In fact, Jimmy Garvin turned babyface in '87 as a combo with the two of them, with him and Ronnie, to go against Flair. And Jimmy, I think, took him on in Great American Bash tour matches, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I move on. But a Flair babyface match, Flair usually dominated, and the babyface had to make comebacks, whether it was Flair, whether it was Dusty or whatever, Ronnie Garvin or whatever. Well, the Ronnie Garvin match at Starrcade's different because Ronnie was the champion, so that match had a different dynamic anyway. But this guy, this Sting, who again I'd only seen in a throwaway 6-man tag at Starrcade '87, he was wrestling differently. He was countering everything. This guy that I had never heard of, and he was countering and clubbing him, and he was excited, and he was pumped up. And I think to myself, who the hell is this guy? And why is he in this ring with no fear of, at that moment, the best wrestler in the world?
Yeah.
No fear. You know what I mean, Dave? He was completely like, I'm going to beat you. And in the grand scheme of things, of course, Sting wouldn't win his first world title for a couple of years. He would eventually beat Flair, of course, at the Great American Bash in 1990 to win his first world title. So it took a couple of years. But he wrestled such a different match against Flair. Now, do I think the match has stood the test of time? I had an interesting discussion with somebody. I think it was Chad Campbell, when we were doing our GWCW matches a couple years ago, our top 100 list. And I had that match in like the 30s, maybe even the 40s. I said to myself, wow, I never thought I would have this match that low. There's better Flair matches, and I think there's actually better Sting matches. Yeah. But that match still stands the test of time.
Absolutely.
Because of that was Sting's coming out party. You had no idea who this guy was, why he's getting a title match on the first major, on the NWA equivalent of Saturday Night's Main Event.
Yeah.
And you're giving him the main event slot against, again, the GOAT. And he hung with him for 40 5 minutes. It's crazy.
It's a sensational match. I enjoy, like you said, it's not. There are better Sting matches and there are better Flair matches. That's not without doubt. But this match, it was so unique, and watching it back, I think it stands the test of time because it's not just a coming out party. In one match, Sting went from lower mid card, and that's really where he'd been sitting, lower mid card, to main event player, to essentially the number one babyface in the company for the rest of his career. In WCW, he was a made man. Flair treated him different. There was something about that match, like you said. It wasn't just no fear, but it was the way he kept coming and the power and the strength. Yet he had that power and strength that you normally saw in WWE guys.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But he had the skill to go with it. He had the charisma to draw the crowd in. So he was a unique combination of everything. And in that one night, he went from a nobody to the main event babyface. I believe on that night he eclipsed Dusty, which probably explains why he was so quickly. He didn't get the rematches. He didn't really. I mean, WCW were pushing Luger and the breakup of the Horsemen, and Luger was sort of the guy they wanted to push for a little while. But it really felt like from the moment that Clash of Champions finished, Sting was seen as the brighter star than Luger, and probably eclipsed Dusty in terms of popularity quite suddenly. And that became even more evident when Dusty left at the end of 88 and Sting moves into really that number one role. He shared it with Flair. He later shares it with Hogan, but he was always at the top, and it all happened in one night. And it's just such an amazing match. And you watch it back and you can see it happening. You can see the swell. You can see the crowd getting behind him, and you can see him emerging as a player. In that one match. So yeah, it's a fantastic match, and he goes on to have a great career and a storied career that we're not here to this isn't a Sting career reflection, but he certainly, I mean, he had some great moments. He had times of being misused, but yeah, he was a made man in one night. It's a great match.
So from that point on, I was a big Sting guy. I did love Flair, but Sting to me was he was the face of the NWA. And then when Crockett sold to Ted Turner and NWA, transitioned to WCW, he just seemed like the guy that, like, all these other guys were bouncing in, bouncing out, bouncing in, bouncing out. And just like The Undertaker, who also has stood the test of time while guys were bouncing in, bouncing out, bouncing in, bouncing out. And Sting was the same way. He was a good employee. He was one of those guys that didn't always have to be champion to be at the top of the card, or always had to be champion to get a good spot, because he was that good at what he did. Was he a great wrestler?
He had enough skill to do what needed to be done.
Correct.
He wasn't a technical marvel. He's not a Steamboat. He's not a Flair. But I think he has more wrestling ability than a Hogan and a Warrior, and so he's in that. But his charisma, and he had enough skill and enough strength to be able to take a bit from each and make it his own. Right. And it made it work. And he was the face of the company. I mean, even when Hogan came in, Sting was still the face of the company, and they had to. You could see they were doing everything they could to push Hogan in the early days, 94, 95, the early days of Nitro, and yet Sting was still the one that everyone was excited to see.
Right.
He never suffered the backlash that Hogan did.
No, he didn't. He should have gotten more opportunities. That Starrcade 97 match should have been a better match. Everything in front of it should have been better. I remember reading that, the reason that Starrcade 97 match was so bad, Bischoff and Hogan were throwing Sting under the bus because Sting came back out of shape. And honestly, I think it's
10. Oh.
Yeah, I think it's all bullshit in my opinion. I think just Hogan, just Terry wanted to be Terry, as Nate Milton would say.
I agree.
But tonight, one thing about Sting, and this is where, again, we're not doing a Sting retrospective because we need Nate Milton here for that. But because Sting's his guy. But what we're doing tonight is, when we think about Sting and Taker, the one thing they didn't have in common, is that there was never consistent rumors about Taker leaving.
Yeah.
The only time that there were rumblings, and this doesn't really count because the whole roster there were rumblings, was after Montreal. Everybody was going to leave because they fucking hated Vince so much. But Taker knew, I'm going to weather the storm because I can't be Undertaker in WWE. In WCW, they'll call me, I don't know, Kane the Undertaker. I don't know what they'll call me. Tombstone or something. Tombstone Mark Calloway or something stupid. So Tombstone Texas Red or something moronic. Anyway, however, on the other hand, there have been many times in history where Sting was definitely rumored to be leaving WCW for the WWF/E. Now, tonight, we are going to hit 4 of those moments. 2 of them are definites. Dave alluded to one at the beginning. And there's another one that, that was very strong rumor that was not, it was more than just innuendo. And then we're going to mention 2 other times in history that you may not have heard, but was definitely the truth. In Sting coming to WWE, whether it was leaving a promotion or whether it was him being a free agent. There are 4 of them that we'll get into tonight. Again, 2 of them you definitely will know because they weren't, secrets. And then 2 of them you may not know, but were certainly discussed. So,
absolutely.
So for the first time in Through the Looking Glass history, Dave, we may need to call this episode Through the Looking Glasses because we're multiple glasses we'll be looking through tonight. So
the multiple layers, it all gets reflected even larger.
Ha! Yes. I love you, Dave Hall. That was great. That's tremendous. So, Dave, why don't you set us up with situation number 1, or let's open up the first looking glass and talk about the first moment or the first scenario where Sting almost came to the WWF.
Well, I think the best place to start is the one we've already alluded to, and that is the one where, as we said, in 2011, it was very strong speculation. I think that's the best one because that's the one that I think is in everyone's mind the most. What was going on? We had these vignettes, the rain, very black and white, a man in a trench coat walking into a cabin of some sort. And as we said, there's this speculation that it was going to be Sting. And Sting has acknowledged, it was acknowledged that he was offered a contract. He was offered the contract to come in and face Taker at WrestleMania. Now, there's some belief out there that maybe the WWE thought he was coming and these vignettes were actually going to be for Sting, and then they transitioned it to Taker. Looking back on them, you can see that they are for Taker. You can very clearly tell that it's supposed to be The Undertaker. But that speculation was rampant. Sting was offered a contract. It's acknowledged that Sting knocked back the contract and re-signed with TNA. But the idea was he was coming in to face The Undertaker at WrestleMania in 2011. So I guess the question needs to be asked, what would that have looked like? How might that have gone? What if on the 22nd of February 2011, it was Sting who appeared in the WWE on Raw, issuing the challenge to The Undertaker? Well, I think if it had happened, I think the roof would have blown off the place, because in 2011, Sting was a veteran, but he'd been wrestling consistently in TNA for a few years as one of their top guys, and he had the history in WCW. The DVD releases that the WWE had come out with, while Sting had never been featured at that point, he was all over multiple DVDs, matches against Flair and against Cactus Jack, and he was all over these DVD releases because of his time in WCW. So WCW specific ones, Rise and Fall of WCW. So he was known to the audience, and I think if he turned up, the roof would have blown off the place in one night. It would have been one of the loudest receptions ever.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you think? I mean, Sting was still in his wrestling prime. 2011 was kind of a wonky year for TNA. Of course, Sting was champion in 2010, and of course, he ended up wrestling that god-awful shit show against Jeff Hardy, who was a freaking mess. I think it was it Victory Road or Against All Odds? I'm trying to remember. What was the...
I can't remember which one, but it was
the
one where it was off his face.
Yeah, he was a mess. He was a mess. And Sting was the TNA champion. He was supposed to wrestle Jeff Hardy, and Jeff Hardy showed up, let's just say, not in working shape. So, and you had Hogan and Bischoff, so Sting was probably like, I don't know if I feel like dealing with this bullshit anymore. So he there was probably some dancing and some courting, but when it turned out probably that Sting was going to job to Taker, because I don't know if Sting would have beaten Taker. I don't know if that was going to happen in Atlanta.
We'll have that conversation in a minute. Yeah, I think that's the conversation we'll have in a moment.
Yeah. Now, had he stayed, I don't think anything else changes. If you remember, of course, our debut episode, Dave, we talked about CM Punk and the pipe bomb. That would not have changed. I think that still would have happened. I don't think there's any doubt. I still think that would have happened.
Yeah.
All that other stuff would have happened. Sting would have probably feuded over the World Heavyweight title with whoever that was, whether it was, Del Rio and Mark Henry and Orton, that whole thing, because Mark Henry was champion in the back half of 2011, the World Heavyweight champion, because Punk and that was the whole Punk, Triple H, Kevin Nash, Del Rio, and all that, and of course
Edge, Christian, and Randy Orton.
Yep. So and then you had Mark Henry, and then Edge retired. So this was the timing would have been good for Sting, because Edge had to leave. Edge was done after, the week after WrestleMania 27 with his neck issue. So he was gone for the next, 10 years or whatever it was. 9 years, whatever it was. So there was an opening. There was an opening for a star. So I think Sting would have fit with the company. I was actually talking to Dr. G about this moments ago. I was at his house earlier today, and I was mentioning to him that you and I were recording, and he said, WWE would have probably screwed it up. He's probably not entirely wrong, as we would see 4 years later. But I think 2011 would have been very interesting on SmackDown if Sting was, because I think they would have wanted Sting on broadcast television, not cable. So I think even though Raw was the bigger show, that's how they always think. I think SmackDown, which was on, the heck was it on in 2011? CW still, I guess. Yeah, I think.
In Australia, it was on Fox, so I couldn't tell you what it was over there.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think. I have a feeling it was. Something tells me it was CW, I think, still, or My 9 or whatever. Anyway, no, it wasn't My 9. Anyway, the point is that's broadcast television, and I think they would have wanted Sting to take advantage, to have him there to take advantage of those ratings. Plus, I think that would have been a fun run with the World Heavyweight title, which is a belt he held a few times in WCW, obviously. And he might not have gotten the buckle bomb from Seth Rollins. That would have, pretty much led him to being nothing more than a tag partner for Darby Allin. So what do you think, Dave? That's what I think. I think he probably, had he stuck around, I think the deal made with him, not only financially, but would have been, all right, you're gonna face Taker Mania, you're gonna lose. We're not breaking the streak, but you will get high-profile main event matches, and we will make you World Heavyweight Champion at some point.
Yeah, well, I guess that therein lies the question. Like, if you bring him in to face Taker, and is it the right thing to have Sting lose his first match back? Now we'll come back to that question a little bit later, but if he's facing Taker, that this is at the peak of the streak. Taker has just beaten the previous year, has just beaten Shawn, and sent Shawn into retirement. And I think it would have been interesting to bring Sting in. I think they would have brought him in as a babyface. I think they would have done the babyface concept and, just backed it on that, icon versus icon. You would have promoted icon versus icon, franchise versus franchise. Neither of them have ever faced each other in a major setting. Now, Sting and Taker did apparently have a couple of house show matches when Taker was in WCW back in 1990, but they'd never really met on any main stage, on TV, on pay-per-view. So I think they would have really built it big, and it would have had a massive, arguably you could see this match. You'd almost come into the argument, does this match almost slot into the main event spot? I mean, 2011 WrestleMania was The Miz and Cena and Rock as the side player, and I guess with Rock there, maybe you still have that main event element kept there. But I could see a Sting Taker match almost taking center stage at Mania. Is it the right thing to beat a guy on his first night in? I think Sting and Taker would have made it work. I think they are both giving enough and understand how the business works that I think Sting would have been happy to put Taker over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Taker would have given him enough to make him a star. I see the match being one of those. Sting probably drops him with the death drop, puts the Scorpion. The ref is probably knocked down at one point, so Sting probably gets a visual pin on Taker or a visual. I don't know whether you'd have Taker tap out, but certainly middle of the ring, can't get to the ropes. Right. For all intents and purposes, Sting's got the match won with the ref down. That's how I think they would have had something in there to really make it look like Sting had Taker beat.
Correct.
There was no ref. I see the finish almost being one of those. I don't even think. I think he'd take I think we'd see the tombstone. I think Sting would be kicking out, and I almost see it being one of those. Just the sheer exhaustion, whether it be a second tombstone, whether it be something happens and Taker just barely able to crawl over, put his arm over, not that dominant pin that Taker does, but that Taker's exhausted, Sting's exhausted, you get that pin, and, it takes them both a couple of minutes to get up. Sting, Taker offers the handshake, possibly even kneels in front of him, sort of acknowledge, hey, you're a man, you're a player, and it took everything I had to beat you. And maybe they walk out together, almost, preempting what happened with Taker and Triple H the year after Hell in a Cell, where they all sort of left together. You could sort of see that
Sure.
sort of imagery of happening, and then I think you then transition Sting to SmackDown, and I agree with you. I think with Edge's injury, I think Sting becomes the player on SmackDown. I would go so far as to say that I see it being that, Del Rio. I think Edge does his retirement. Del Rio wins, maybe is given the title or whatever. Del Rio and Sting basically meet at the next event, and Sting beats him, and Sting goes on a run. I think he then faces Randy Orton, he faces Christian, he works his way through the SmackDown crew, and I think he probably dominates SmackDown for a good 6 to 9 months, and then maybe you put the belt back on Orton. Orton, it could almost be Orton's next vendetta. He's trying to doing everything he can to finally beat Sting, and Sting puts Orton over as almost a repassing. He does that moment of passing a torch to Orton, and then probably moves on to some lower end feuds, putting some young guys over, building them up, being what Taker, the role Taker played before he went to one match a year. I think Sting takes that role on for a couple of years, and probably almost sort of ends his time in WWE with putting Brock over when Brock comes back. I could see that being a way that something he would do, and something they would look at being a way to really push Brock up there and give him a big win. So that's how I think I would have seen that a 2011 Sting run go.
The Brock thing's interesting. I never really thought about that. If we forget that Brock obviously Brock makes his triumphant return the following year, the night after WrestleMania 28. And for the most part, he's now been here almost a decade on and off, which is pretty funny. He's been here longer than he was the first time.
Yeah.
How long would Sting stick around? I
think they'd look at trying to transition him the way they've done the other big time players. I think if he could have stayed healthy and had a good 12-month run, I think losing the Brock, he then becomes another one who starts making annual WrestleMania appearances.
Well, it's funny you say that, Dave, because, we take this into account. We lost Shawn in 2010. So we don't get the automatic 5-star epic against somebody. So adding Sting is actually a pretty big deal. Because we were able to get either Taker and Shawn together, which of course we got two years in a row, or Taker in a match and Sting in a match. But with Shawn gone, you get Sting, and now you get 2 annual epic level matches with Sting and somebody versus and Taker and somebody.
Yeah.
So,
and I think you would have been able to take advantage of some of the history that played in. Like it's we've got to look at time periods and time differences. But can you imagine Sting going up against someone like Cody Rhodes? Granted, we're talking 10 years ago, but Cody Rhodes, the son of Dusty, Sting, who wrestled
Right.
with Dusty, and you could almost do a few of these little historical look backs. Sting meeting guys who have a tie to WCW legends, where they were trained by someone, or the son of something, son of Dusty. You could, I think, you could create that era of the cross generational thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he probably would have lasted close to now. Him and Taker might have maybe gone out at the same time. Obviously, they're both in the Hall of Fame now. So,
well, imagine 1 year. I mean, an epic 1 year. Although it sort of defeat. Well, after Taker has lost the streak, 1 year could have been Sting and Taker together, teaming up.
Right.
It would have been an interesting one.
Mm. So I think 2011, thumbs up or thumbs down. If Taker, if Sting made it to WWE, I think this is a thumbs up. I think it would have been successful. I think it would have been used properly. Would anybody have gotten screwed in terms of the primary universe? Yeah.
Maybe Christian, and even then, Christian never really got what he deserved. Like, he never got the real run. Like, he was a storyline player, sort of between Edge and Orton, but he never really. He might have lost that opportunity to get a couple of, to get a run with the belt. But outside of that, I'm not sure that anyone would really lose out.
Well, the interesting thing, I'm going to disagree with you slightly. The only thing I'm going to say is Christian was a heel, so he probably would have been in the spot. As a matter of fact, they probably could have used the TNA history between Christian and Sting, because I'm pretty sure they wrestled, together when they were both in TNA, in the mid to late 2000s. Probably Orton, because Orton was the baby face that was eventually feuding with Mark Henry. Does Daniel Bryan get screwed? Because Daniel Bryan cashes in on Big Show after Big Show beats Mark Henry at, I'm going to say, was it TLC 11? Yeah. And then Daniel Bryan cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase. But
in all reality, I don't think I ever see Sting having a long run. I think he would have got maybe 6 months at the most, and maybe they do. Maybe it's Mark Henry that beats him, and you're back on track. You're still going to get you'll still have Big Show or and Daniel Bryan is still going to cash in the way he did. I don't think any of them would really lose out. I think Sting's time at the top would probably not be very long.
Let me ask you this next question. Do we wait a year on Rock Cena 1? And at WrestleMania in Miami, do we have Rock Sting?
That would be an interesting match. That could that would have been fantastic. Or maybe after having Rock Cena the first time, instead of the build up to Rock Cena 2, once in a lifetime for the second time.
Right.
Maybe the sequel is then Rock going, I'm after you, Sting. Maybe Sting wins at WrestleMania the night before, and then it's Rock sort of going, you stole my thunder. I'm coming for you next year. And then you have a 12-month build up with Rock and Sting, and it's not so much of an issue then, because the title won't be on the line, and Punk might get his main event slot as well.
Yeah.
As a result.
That's very interesting. So I was saying Rock Sting, then Rock Cena. You're saying still do Rock Cena at 28 and do Rock Sting at 29 in MetLife.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I'd love that because I was there. So I would have had no problem with that at all. So you would have had Rock Sting. Now, the only switch up there is that we probably don't get Punk Taker. unless Punk gets to break the streak. But that's another. We're going down another looking glass that we already
we've
tried
been down that one before. Yeah,
exactly. So all right, so there's our 2011. That's obviously the most well-known Sting rumor.
And look, what before we move on to the other rumors, while we've been talking about would Sting go over Taker in his first match, I think this is the time to ask: should Sting have beaten Triple H in 2015, sorry. Should Sting have gone over and beaten Triple H in that first match back? I asked the biggest Triple H fan in the world.
You son of a bitch. No. The answer is yes. Sting should have won. Yes. Of course he should have won. I even know that. Come on, Dave. You know me long enough. Everybody's known me long enough. I know I'm not that kind of a dipshit. I'm not like some guys that have their heads buried in the sand. I've never. Have I defended Triple H in positions where it's probably hard to? Yeah, from time to time. This case, no. Sting should have won. Sting should have won.
Yeah, I agree.
No doubt.
When I was prepping, I read some stuff, and I think it was I don't listen to all these podcasts, but I think it was one of Road Dogg's podcasts that he does. They were talking about this time period, and the attitude was the reason Hunter went over was because they were hoping and wanting to build Hunter versus Rock the following year, and obviously that same night they had the moment with
Rock and
Ronda Rousey and all that. And I'm like, look, I get that this idea of we want Triple H to go over because he's going to face Rock the next year, but to me that doesn't cut it, because Triple H at this point, Triple H was untouchable. He had his spot. He was. Everyone knew who he was. He could lose to everyone and still be in a match, make a match against The Rock work, because they had history. They had legit history that everyone knows about. And the fact is, later in the night, you've got the Ronda Rousey incident. No one cared whether Hunter had beaten Sting or not. When they come out to that ring and he and Steph come out to the ring and have the interactions with Rousey, no one would have cared what happened earlier in the night. You were marked and you were building. Sting should have gone over. It's one of the biggest bad decisions, I think, in WrestleMania history.
I agree. No, of course, I absolutely agree. At that point, I didn't care about. At that point, for me, I didn't care about Triple H wins and losses. I just wanted him to still put on great matches. I didn't care whether he won matches or lost matches at that point. Now,
what's more ridiculous is Sting loses to Triple H, and then his next match is a world title match against Seth Rollins. Well, how do you warrant that? He didn't win. He hasn't won a match. How does he get a world title shot when he's never won in the company? It didn't fit. Storyline wise, it just didn't fit.
Yeah, it was just so. It was crazy. Yeah, I don't know. Now, if we're going to talk about Triple H, he should have. The match with Roman Reigns the following year should have been another 20 minutes. It should have been a 48-minute match. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's, no, absolutely not. No. But no, the answer is yes. Sting should have definitely won that match. I don't know if that was supposed to be a promise to Vince to put the final dagger in the Monday Night War. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Triple H promised that to Vince or if that was Vince just getting his last, his final moment thing. Like, I don't know. It made no sense. It made zero sense. And did it ruin Sting? Nah, not really. I thought the NWO coming out to help him made even less sense because they beat the crap out of him and feuded with him throughout most of the Night War.
Yeah, well, he was the whole NWO was built around Sting being against them, coming down from the rafters, building to that Hogan match. Like the fact that Sting ended up joining the Wolfpack. I mean, the NWO was dead by that was just dragging stuff out. But Sting and the NWO, they were not really allies. So why bring them out? It didn't make sense in any way.
No, exactly. It didn't. So
if we're going to rebook it, Sting just goes over clean. No interference, no nothing. Sting goes over clean. He's got a guaranteed build to his world title shot because he can say, I beat Hunter, I want a shot at the belt. And Hunter then comes out later in the night and badmouths Ronda Rousey and Rock like they did, and you start building to a match that never happened anyway.
Right. So there's our first scenario, the one most common. Dave, you are driving the express here. Where would you like to go next?
Well, I think we're going to go back 10 years earlier than that. 20 years earlier than that even. I found out something interesting in researching this month's episode, and that is Sting has interviewed and said that there have been other times where he considered going to WWE, and one of those times was in the early 90s because he spoke about the fact that he was in contract negotiations or renegotiations with Jim Herd, and Sting was of the belief and the opinion that at that time he was worth what he referred to as Ric Flair money and Road Warrior money. So he was expecting a contract right at the top of the pay scale, and
correct
at that time probably well warranted. He was the number one. He was the number one babyface. That's certainly. And he talked about how he got lowballed by Jim Herd. Jim Herd wasn't giving him the contract that he hoped for, and so he entered into talks with WWE to go there and possibly join them. Now, again, this is supported by the fact that on one of Bruce Pritchard's podcasts, he's talked about the fact that WWE were in talks with Sting, but Vince McMahon didn't want to bring him in because Vince's attitude was, well, we've got Warrior. He's just like Warrior. We've already got the Ultimate Warrior. Why do I need another one? And so Vince he didn't want to have anything to do with it. Negotiations pretty well never went beyond that point. Sting ends up re-signing with WCW. So if we look at time periods, if we look at what we know if Sting was negotiating at a time when Warrior was still there and Jim Herd was in WCW, we're talking around about 1990 or 1991 because Jim Herd was gone in 92 and Bill Watts took over. So, and I don't think it was unlikely that he would have been negotiating in 1990 because he was made world champion at that point. And so it's probably after that world title run that he would have thought, I'm entitled to a bigger contract. I'm that man now, and it would have been warranted. So I think we're probably looking at around about 1991. So the question has to be, what might have happened if Sting had signed with WWE in 91? How could he have been brought in? What storylines might have made sense at the time? Now, I think that if he was going to sign with WWE, I don't think when you look at what was happening sort of that late 1990 into 1991, I don't think he would have been coming in any time before WrestleMania. They had all their storylines built. You had Hogan and Slaughter. You had Warrior versus Savage. I think it doesn't go from there. What I think might have been an interesting way to bring Sting in would have been if Warrior, they started the storyline with Jake the Snake Roberts and The Undertaker. And Warrior was that whole I'm not afraid of the dark and Jake training him and trying to help him overcome his fear. And then, of course, it's Jake working with The Undertaker against the Ultimate Warrior. And we know that was supposed to be what was going to happen moving forward after SummerSlam when Warrior gets himself fired at SummerSlam. I really wonder what it might have been like if Ultimate Warrior was looking to, after he gets turned on by Jake, if maybe he turned to an old friend to come and help him in his war with Jake the Snake and The Undertaker. I wonder what it might have looked like. I think one of the best ways to bring Sting in would have been to team up with initially team up with Warrior and support him against Jake and The Undertaker, which then would allow Sting to maybe siphon off one or the other and enter into a feud maybe with Taker or with Jake, either one. But essentially, I guess Sting would almost take the spot of Randy Savage. And Randy Savage may not have come back as soon as he did, because I always felt Randy Savage's comeback was because Warrior got fired and they needed to plug the hole. So, yeah, I wonder if that might have been the way to bring him back, because 91's an interesting year because you got Flair coming in and you got Sid coming in as well. So it becomes, how would you juggle all these guys coming in from WCW? I think you link Sting to the Warrior. You maybe fast track the Jake turn a little bit earlier, and then maybe you've got Sting becoming the teammate of Warrior at maybe a SummerSlam match against Jake and The Undertaker. And you start to build from there. And then maybe Hogan has a Desert Storm rematch with Slaughter as a world title match at SummerSlam, and do that match that they've been doing across the country and getting, some really good matches out of it. That's what I'm wanting. Maybe that's what do you think? How would maybe you have brought Sting in 1991?
Well, I like your Jake thing is pretty cool. I like that thinking. I'm going to assume, and I got to look back at. I might have to, after we do this episode, I might have to go back to our Warrior episode and think about what I thought when I thought that he was starting to get on Vince's nerves, because it's pretty much, by SummerSlam 91, obviously that night, Vince is done with this guy's bullshit and he's gone. I'm going to take it a step further. And I think that Sting becomes the third partner for Warrior and Hogan, so we get an actual 6-man tag at SummerSlam with Slaughter, Adnan, and Mustafa against Hogan, Warrior, and Sting. Ooh. Do you debut him at SummerSlam? No, because you want to build that up. Yeah. You want to announce it and then get more buys. Then Warrior's gone. We'll do it for this specific Looking Glass. We'll just assume, like the Prime Universe, that Warrior is a colossal pain in the ass, and Vince says hit the bricks. So now you've just supplanted one, baby face paint guy with another, but one that's more willing to play ball, that's a better company guy.
Better in-ring worker.
What a veteran. And then you've got Flair coming in, and Sting there makes Flair more comfortable. Sid probably gets along with Sting. And now suddenly you may have some symmetry in that main event. And guess what? You know who it's crazy? You know who kind of feels like the odd man out? Hogan.
Yeah.
You don't get I don't think you get the Taker back and forth. But now Hogan's sitting here. And now suddenly Vince has all these shiny new toys from the other promotion, because 1991 WCW was a disaster with a Pizza Hut guy calling the shots. That's a mess. So what a Royal Rumble. Well, that Rumble's already great, but
let me take it a step further.
Okay.
Flair wins Rumble 92. I don't think there's any doubt. From the moment Flair came, they were going to put the title on him. And I think Rumble 92 happens regardless. I think the Undertaker back and forth is all about getting the belt on Flair. But if you've got Sting in the company, can you imagine Sting and Flair at WrestleMania? Can you imagine bringing those two together and basically getting guys behind the scenes saying, go out there and top what you guys did at Clash of Champions. Go out there and top what you guys have done before. Go and put on a clinic and make each other look great. Can you imagine how good that, because they've got a couple of years more experience under them, and with the backing and the push that Vince can put on, they can come up with their own story as they would. But can you imagine? I just think it would be a great spectacle. I mean, we've talked before about Hogan and Flair at WrestleMania 7, but if Sting was in the company and you've put the belt on Flair, can you imagine the sort of matches you could have with Vince's promotional machine behind them, putting those two together in the ring at WrestleMania? I think it would just be poetry in motion.
Oh, there's any doubt. You could have Savage somewhere else. Well, what I would do is, and we talked about this when we were rebooking that whole situation on a past episode, any way that you could extend the Savage Jake storyline to where, because at the time, no one cared who Taker wrestled at the time. At the time, nobody cared. You could have stuck Taker with anybody, DiBiase or something. Nobody cares. I would have very easily extended the Jake Savage feud all the way to WrestleMania 8, and that's where you have Savage wrestle. Savage Jake, you still do Hogan Sid, but you do Hogan Sid in the middle.
Yeah.
And you end the show with Flair Sting. And everyone's like, oh, why would you have two NWA guys at the end of your WrestleMania? I'll tell you why. Because at that moment, Vince could tell Jim Herd, hey, dipshit, guess what you blew? Right here. Good luck. Good luck with the rest. Now, fortunately, by that point, Jim Herd was gone. Bill Watts came in, and 1992 was actually not a bad year for WCW. But this is WCW finally, this WCW saying, oh, crap. We really screwed this up.
And then you have to ask yourself the question, if Sting was there and Sting, let's say Sting goes over and beats Flair at WrestleMania, does Sid leave the company so quickly? Because can you imagine Sid and Sting then in WWF in 1992 battling it out? Like you said, Sid was probably comfortable with Sting. They'd faced off before. I'm just picturing the possibilities of Sting in the company at the time. Maybe Sting meets Randy Savage at SummerSlam in England as that babyface Sting as preparation to put the belt back onto Flair. Like, you can just see, you can run some of the storylines they run can still run it with a Sting element to them, and yet it opens up different opportunities and different options.
Absolutely. And then you're talking, Sting, Sid, and yeah, I mean, don't forget, you got Brett, you got Piper. How about Sting Piper? I mean, both baby faces, but
I think when we've always talked about looking through when we go through these rabbit holes and we talk about how it might have affected if Sting was there, I think the one person who probably would have been negatively affected would have been Bret Hart.
Yeah, probably that his push would have been delayed, and that might have not been a bad thing, because if we have Sting into 1993. Then maybe we don't get the Hogan bullshit at WrestleMania 9. And now WrestleMania 9, suddenly you have Yoko, Sting, and now Savage. Things might be very different in 1993. I don't know about the whole, I don't know if there's a difference involved in the steroids and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how that, obviously Sting doesn't get affected because he wasn't there in the 80s. I mean, maybe he took them when he was in WCW, but I doubt it.
But the thing about Sting is, while he was a strong guy, he never looked like he was a steroid user. Now, I'm sure he probably did use them at times. A lot of guys did, but he didn't have the physique of your Hogans and your Warriors. He was strong. He was stronger and more muscly than a Flair or a Bret Hart, but he didn't have the overblown muscles of your Warrior and Hogan. So Sting, he may have almost been the perfect person to have in the middle of the steroid scandal, because he still looks big and strong, and yet he doesn't look like a steroid user.
Right. Now, we have to look at the other side of the coin, Dave. So let's ask this question. If this did happen and Sting is in the WWF in 1991, 1992 until for whenever, who's the babyface in 1992 WCW that feuds with Vader?
Well, the question would have to be argued: would they have even turned Lex Luger heel in '91? Would they, with Sting's left the company in '91, do they keep Luger as their babyface of the promotion, and do they put everything behind Luger, and do they have Luger run as the top guy, as a top babyface, not just through '91, but then re-sign him and keep him in '92, '93?
Sure, probably. You're probably right. It'd probably be Luger and Sting. Luger and Vader. Yeah. Oh God, those matches. Ugh.
Or, as I said, if the one person I see losing in WWF is Bret Hart, does Bret sign? Does Bret go to WCW? And does he become the guy that has the amazing feud with Vader?
Why do I feel like Dave? We just opened up another episode. We might have to. That one we have to tackle another month. Bret Hart leaving WWF and seeing what happened. That would, because there were a lot of rumors he was supposed to leave at night. Remember?
Yeah, January 93, January 92.
92. Yeah.
Yeah.
He had the infamous 100-and-something degree fever that where he was supposed to lose the. That's why he lost the IC belt to the Mountie. And they made up the flu in Lowell or whatever the heck, pneumonia or whatever the heck he had. And then it led to Piper, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, he might be the. I agree with you 100%. What would. Now, Bret might not be the only one that leaves. Because with all these main event guys and baby faces and heels, what happens to Shawn?
Yeah.
So, I think this bowl of wax got quite large. We'll worry about the WCW half of it on another episode because that could get kind of crazy. But I think Sting in WWF, how long would he last? I'll be honest, he probably stays till. Depends on how long the contract is.
If he's the company man that everyone says he is, and if Vince was to get behind him, if we got the sort of stuff that we've talked about here where Vince pushes him and Vince gets behind him, Vince sees that he's better than Warrior because he's not going to be a troublemaker. I see him having a run like Taker. He becomes a lifer. I could see it happening if they got behind him, because then he becomes one of Vince's guys, and runs with Vince the whole time.
Yeah, because I could see Sting when the company financially is in a little bit of peril in 95, 94, 95, 96. I could definitely see Sting as the kind of guy to be like, listen, let's restructure my deal. I'll help you out. I want to make this good right. I'll work with you. Defer me. We'll work it out. Don't worry about it. We need to build this company. And, this is a ripple effect. We may have to really talk about this, because with Sting gone, Luger doesn't leave. Luger probably doesn't leave in 92. And then has the 1 year in the WBF or whatever. Because if Luger leaves as well, then WCW might as well have shut the door.
They would have been, yeah.
They might as well shut the door. That wasn't going to happen. I think if Sting left, I think Luger doesn't leave.
That's right.
I think Luger stays in WCW.
Because they make him the number one guy. With Flair gone, Sting gone, and Sid gone, there's no one to rival him. They would do everything and bend over backwards to keep him, because he would be all they had left.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. And it's an interesting question of how long that lasts. The 90s could be very different. You know, who knows the elevation of Shawn, the elevation of, you have Razor there. Maybe we don't get maybe Razor Ramon doesn't leave or Diamond Stud doesn't leave and he's elevated. Sting not being in WCW in the early 90s really does change the landscape of both companies in many ways.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, again, we may be talking about that at a future episode, Dave, where we talk about guys like Brett and Shawn. Do they leave? Does Scott Hall stay? Does Kevin Nash stay in WCW? Does he? Because here's the thing. If you remember, Eric Bischoff was not the biggest Lex Luger fan. So when he becomes the head of, when he becomes VP in 93 and they talk about the build and they get Hogan and all that and they get to Nitro in 95, but he doesn't have Sting, but he's stuck with Luger. Clearly, Bischoff is looking to get other guys. And in that moment, perhaps we're not talking about Duggan and Beefcake and fucking Honky Tonk Man and all these other dregs that all of Hogan's useless cronies. Yeah. And instead, Bischoff starts to cherry pick the Bret Harts, the Shawn Michaels, those guys, because, Vince eventually can't pay for everybody. And those guys eventually want to get through the glass ceiling. So in something that would be reminiscent, 7 or 8 years later with Benoit and Eddie and, and Perry and Dean. Now, in 1992, you're thinking guys like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and all them, they now don't get their shots because Sting is there. And if Luger does end up leaving because Bischoff can't stand him, there's a huge hole in WCW where they need to grow young talent. And I do think that I can't believe we went down this hole. That Bischoff may need to rebuild WCW if all these guys are going to the WWF. Having said that, Vince remember, the company was changing in 93 for Vince, so I don't know if Vince, we're sitting here saying all these guys would have been there. I don't know if Vince could have afforded all of these guys.
That's right.
Sting might have been nice enough to restructure his deal. I don't know about any of those other guys would have. I'm sure Hulk Hogan would have been like, no. So it's very interesting because unlike the other scenarios we're going to discuss this evening involving Sting, this is the one where the ripple effect goes both ways. Our other example later in this decade may also do it, but I don't think it's as bad as here. I think again, Dave, continue. I would love to continue to hear your thoughts on this as well in terms of the roster, because this is the biggest ripple effect moment of the ones we discussed tonight involving Sting leaving. Sting goes to WWF in 1991, and you're talking about a completely different landscape, I think, in both companies, in WWF and in WCW, because things get moved. And
I think you're talking. I think you would legitimately be talking about whether or not WCW went out of business, because I think if they'd lost Flair and Sting within a couple of months of each other, I don't know that they would have recovered. Like the genuine talk is the only reason they survived as long as they did was that Turner had the love for the company, and no matter how much money they lost, he wasn't getting rid of them because of the ratings that they brought him to TBS. But if Sting wasn't there as well, and he's really got, and I mean, if we just take like I said, whether Luger was to stay or not, you're talking about a situation where they just may not have had the star power to keep the company going.
Right.
They may have actually gone under completely. It really seems to be in that 92, 93 time period. If it's Sting who holds WCW together almost, and without him, they might have folded, and we might have been talking about some other company having to rise up and build afresh.
Well, I mean, obviously, still by 93, ECW was still growing, and I think that still would have happened. So maybe ECW becomes the number 2. The problem there is Paul Heyman needed money, and he didn't have the money that he didn't have the money WCW had. So, yeah, I it's very interesting. That's even more so. Isn't it amazing? Even more so than Flair leaving for the WWF. Like Flair leaving was like, all right, Flair left, but Sting leaving for the WWF, and suddenly this is a ridiculous ripple effect and turn of events between WWF and WCW if Sting leaves. Flair left, and it's like, all right, Flair left. Sting leaves, and suddenly we're putting companies out of business. Isn't that bizarre? But isn't that crazy?
It's wild.
You know? So we may have to, because the Brett one is interesting, and that, maybe Dave, when we have when we chat in our production meetings, that may be a future episode topic. What about Bret Hart in reverse? Because if there was an equivalent of rumored to leave, the number 2 one behind Sting leaving for WWF is Bret Hart leaving for WCW. Obviously, the difference there is it actually happened.
Herb had him going every other month, didn't he?
I know, right? Every time we do the note, we fire up a little Herb on the Place to Be podcast. Herb seems to say that Bret's leaving for WCW like every other week for about 2 years. It's ridiculous. He was leaving in 88. He was leaving in 90. He was leaving in 93. It was like every 2.5 years. Brett's supposedly pissed off and is leaving for WCW. This is so stupid. This is ridiculous. So anyway, there's a scenario that kind of popped out of nowhere, but interestingly, we are in a unusual rabbit hole of what happens to both companies if Sting leaves for the WWF in 1991. That's batshit. What happens there? It really does. Any final thoughts on this scenario, Dave?
I'm picking myself up off the floor after that one. I
can't believe it's nuts how far we went down. It's amazing how far we went down with a scenario that you excuse me, when you were doing our research, and you just found that pretty much out of air, that room. And holy crap, how screwed up that would have been had that happened. That would have been crazy. Ric Flair left for the WWF in real life in 1991, and everything was fine. We hypothetically have Sting leaving for the WWF in 1991, and suddenly shit's all on fire. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, what do we have next?
All right. Well, look, we found ourselves in the mid-90s. So let's have a look at another rumor. And you were mentioning a pretty persistent rumor that was happening in the mid-90s. So why don't you share that one?
All right. So it was discussed heavily, and I remember it in the mags. And it was discussed that Sting was going to leave WCW and come to the WWF in 1996. This was another rumor that was discussed often. And eventually, of course, as he always did, Sting did the right thing and stayed with WCW, which in this instance was good for him. Now, 1996, of course, is one of the most important years, epic, game-changing years in the history of pro wrestling. Almost as much as 1997 would be. 1997 is a seminal year in the history of wrestling. But 1996 is a year where everything seems to change.
It's the foundation. It's the foundation for what happens in 97. All the progress that you talk about 97 being that sort of, it's a big year, but everything that happened there had its basis in what happened in 96. Both companies had massive changes happening in 96 that shaped the future of the companies for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, the Monday Night War ratchets up in 1996. obviously, with the birth of the NWO and such. But if Sting leaves and signs with the World Wrestling Federation in 1996, here's the thing. Before we even put Sting on television, this is the one year where money is probably we have 4 scenarios we're discussing tonight. This is probably the one scenario where money might be the issue and nothing else. Because obviously in 1996, WWF is not in the great straits it was in the 80s, or as they would be by the early to mid 2000s. 1996, WWF is kind of walking a fiscal tightrope. So it's not a question in 1996 of whether or not they can do the right things with Sting. The question is, can they afford Sting? That's the interesting thing, because Sting shouldn't have to come. It's one thing, Dave, when we were just talking about the 1991 scenario. It's one thing if he's already in the company and says, I'll structure my contract, I'll help you out. It's another thing where you're trying to get him as a free agent, and Vince goes, it's the best I could do. I might have to, I'm not lowballing you. I'm only giving you the best offer I possibly can.
And with that, like you said, money being the thing, even if they're paying him whatever they're paying him, it's still going to be for WWF at the time, it's probably going to have to be one of their more expensive contracts, no matter whether it's a lower contract than maybe he might what Sting might have wanted or whatever. If he was to come in, it's still going to be a contract that is going to be at the top end of the contracts that Vince has got going. I mean, there's not going to be many guys he's going to have on more money at that time. He just might not be able to give him as much money as maybe Sting would want. But then that raises the question: if you're bringing him in on a high contract from a WWF perspective, then how are you going to use him? Can you do anything other than make him your top guy or one of your top guys if you're going to be paying him one of your higher contracts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slippery slope. So that might have been one of the main reasons why the 1996 scenario doesn't happen, not for creative reasons, but for fiscal reasons. Because obviously the big albatross in 1996 is Brett, not albatross. The other scenario. How do I word it? The other talent situation that Vince has to figure out is Brett. I got to tell you, if he wants Sting, unlike our 1991 scenario where Vince is kind of flush with cash and can do this, 1996 he's not. So I think if he signs Sting, Brett's gone.
If he signs Sting, Bret Hart's the third man.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I don't think there's any doubt that that's what happened. I agree. I think if he can't juggle everyone, and we already know that the Bret Hart contract put Vince into a difficult position, one that he wasn't able to. He felt he wasn't going to be able to honor. 12 months later, he wasn't able to honor the contract in his mind, and and when we talked in our Bret Hart episode, and 12 months after that, they were flush with cash and probably could have paid twice as much as they were paying him, but they didn't know where that was going. In 96, they bring Sting in, Bret Hart wouldn't be staying. And I guess, and there lies, is that where we see, does Sting come in essentially playing the Bret Hart role? Does Sting come into that position where maybe he debuts, maybe he's battling Stone Cold, fresh off his King of the Ring thing. Maybe he's going very quickly into title matches against Sid and against Shawn Michaels, and he's in that belt bouncing around time period that happened in late 96, early 97. But Is it as simple as that? Does Sting just come in and essentially replace Bret Hart, position on the card? Not necessarily exact storylines, but certainly most likely opponents. Is that what we're looking at?
Sting versus Stone Cold?
Yeah, is that how he gets introduced? Does he essentially just replace Bret Hart in the company and take that spot as on the roster? Because I can't see much else happening. I mean, if he comes in earlier in the year, I mean, I'm assuming that the whole Sting leaving would probably be timed around the arrival of Nash and Hall and the NWO, and whether or not Sting fits into that storyline. That's the only thing I could think of in terms of like when he come. Like, even if he was to come earlier in the year, like Shawn Michaels has been built up to take on the title. So if he comes in around WrestleMania, there's not a lot. Where do you fit him in? Like, if he comes in at WrestleMania, well, Bret and Shawn are wrestling for the title. Taker is in his, Taker's wrestling Diesel, and they've got their thing going. Where does Sting? I don't see a fit for Sting before WrestleMania, so you bring him in after WrestleMania. Well, again, you've just put the title on Shawn. Shawn's going to be running with the belt for a while. Does he take the role of warrior? Does he become the allies with Shawn in the battle against Camp Cornette, and then maybe battling Stone Cold Steve Austin and for a shot at the title, and being the and moving into that extra that accessory role almost.
Yeah, and I could definitely see that. And then maybe you don't see Sid come back. Sid doesn't come back. And eventually maybe Sting wins the world title at the end of 96. And then into 97, Shawn, and this may lead to, because don't forget, at the time, Shawn was, Mr. Asshole. So Bret's gone, but now all of a sudden Shawn's got to deal with, and unlike Bret, who Shawn considered his equal, so he thought he could, dick Shawn around because they were equals, and Shawn thought he maybe was superior. In the case of Sting, Shawn knows he doesn't have a leg to stand on. Sting's already a stud at this point, and Shawn can't when it comes to status, Shawn doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to that, in my opinion, at that time. So you still have a major spot at the top of the card in 96. You don't have Bret now, but you've got Shawn, Sting, Sid, Vader. How about this? Now, because in this universe, Dave, the Sting Vader stuff did happen in 92. Now you got Vader here, and now you could have Sting and Vader feuding. Now, it may not necessarily have to be for the title. And then Stone Cold is probably the one. Oh, God. I don't know. Damn.
It's a really awkward situation. Like,
it really is.
And I wonder if you bring Sting in, does he suffer from the politicking that Michaels did? Like, we know that Vader never got probably the run he should have had in WWE because of Shawn. Shawn's politics, the way he worked with Vince and all that. Vader suffered. Does the same thing happen to Sting? Is Shawn politicking and pointing stuff out, and Sting is fighting an uphill battle, not because he doesn't have the talent, but because Shawn is the backstage, manipulator. Shawn, no. This is the peak of you got to remember, this is the peak of the clique. This is Shawn throwing tantrums in the ring because Vader wasn't in the right spot, and no one does anything about it.
Right.
This is Sean. This is Sean, doing what he wants when he wants, and and then when he doesn't get it, picking up his ball, losing his smile, and going home, and Vince bending over backwards to get him back as quick as he can. I find it difficult for Sting to. I find it difficult for Sting to ever going to get any real momentum in the company, because if he comes in, like we said, at the time period, if he comes in and is sort of allied with Sean, I mean, maybe whether he comes in instead of Sid or he comes in instead of Warrior, he's got that role, and he's still working alongside Sean. He can be wrestling other guys. You're still going to get Stone Cold. I think that's going to happen, because unless you put Sting as King of the Ring, and I don't think they would, then Austin comes through. Austin's still gonna break out, and the momentum, his momentum was so unique. Once that Austin 316 happened, it was never going to be stopped.
Maybe. Let me stop you for a minute, because I want, before I lose this out of my head, I want to get to that point about Stone Cold. What if Stone Cold then maybe starts a feud with Taker? Now, by the end of '96, Taker's feud with Mankind is pretty much pooped out. Mankind's starting to get some face pops a little bit, and he's starting to, maybe you start turning him babyface a little earlier. And Sting, first off, your answer, does Sting put up with Sean's crap? No. Because Sean's gonna be intimidated by Sting, because Sting is a stud. In Sean's eyes, Brett was his equal or inferior. But Sting, he wouldn't been able to pull that crap off with Sting. So it wouldn't surprise me if Vince was like, you know what, Sean, fuck off. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, because I just can't see, Brett, things were changing with Brett in '96 within the company, and there was, the issues with Sean and him were almost equal. Whereas in the case of Sting, I don't think Sean's got the teeth to get in Sting's face. Because Sting, look, dude, I've been in this business a hell of a lot longer than you. Okay, I've been a main eventer, I've been a world champion, and I'm not going to sit here and listen to your bullshit. I'm not. So I don't know. Sting is a different beast than Brett when you're dealing with Sean at the back end of '96. And I'll tell you something. Sean throws a temper tantrum in a Sting match, Sting drops him. So, Mick didn't put up with his crap at Mind Games. Vader just seemed, at SummerSlam, Vader just seemed confused. I don't know. I think he just seemed confused. But at Mind Games, you remember, Mick didn't put up with Sean's crap. And I think the situation is exactly the same with Sting. I think if there's a match and Sean throws a temper tantrum, I think Sting drops him. And then they'll have their own issues backstage after.
Yeah. And Sting and Sean still ends up taking his smile and going
home. And he may not come back.
He may not. But I think, and maybe the top of the card is a little bit more stable. Maybe they don't bounce the title around as much. Maybe Sting gets a little bit of a run with it, and then maybe Sting drops it to Taker at WrestleMania.
Sure.
Or maybe Sting's in a submission match with Steve Austin. But I don't see Sting being turned heel the way that Bret Hart did, because that was a fan reaction as well. I think.
Right. Exactly.
So it creates all sorts of things. The one thing I am worried about, though, is I feel that timing wise, Vince may not have got as behind Sting as we might like. And you mentioned, imagine he's there with Vader, putting on a match with Vader. But Foley talks in his books about how he pitched wrestling against Vader at WrestleMania, and basically building on their history and how they can have this great match and how he can make Vader again. and then it never really came to fruition because Vince didn't want to get behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I could see the same thing happening with Sting. I could see Sting getting a run with the belt, maybe getting, because they're going to be paying him. But in the end, I think Sting makes way for Shawn Michaels, for Steve Austin. Sting is going to be the one that, maybe it's a Sting and Austin feud, and maybe they are able to turn Sting heel. Who knows? Maybe we get the development of a Crow type character and Sting adapts, and maybe Sting has some matches with Taker. But I think in the end, Sting is probably not going to be used the way he would want, and I think his contract expires and he goes running back to WCW.
Entirely possible. He may still think the landscape. He may go to Vince and say, this guy's going to, I've been in this business a long time, Vince. This guy's going to ruin your company. Meaning Shawn. This bullshit can't happen. You're the boss of this company, not him. Act like it. To the other side of the coin, and we won't go too deep in these weeds because we'll get more into this if we do our Brett show. Without Sting, who is the guy that goes up against the NWO? And I have that answer very easily, and I think you'll agree with me. DDP.
Yeah.
I think he gets elevated earlier than he was kind of getting put over anyway as a face in 97, but Sting was just higher on the card. But I think you elevate DDP, and I think Bischoff does a good job with that, and maybe you have DDP and Hogan at Starrcade 97, and maybe things are a little different. I don't know. But
I don't know that DDP would have had the same impact. I agree with you. I think DDP becomes the natural guy that the fans are turning to, but I don't know if they would put him over Hogan. I think you really are then waiting for Goldberg to really rise up. I think Hogan just carries it through, and he probably faces DDP, probably beats DDP, and then it's the rise of Goldberg, and then it becomes the Goldberg show.
Now, we can also say this though: if Brett is already in WCW, Montreal never happens, and Starrcade and Starrcade 97 doesn't have that kind of gravitas that it had in the Prime universe. So,
but if Brett goes to WCW earlier in the year, if he goes in 96, if he signs in 96, right from the start, maybe he doesn't join the NWO. Maybe he comes in as almost the bidding war. Like the NWO want him, WCW wants him, and he's almost in that same position as Sting, but he doesn't sit in the rafters. He obviously makes the call earlier in the year, and then maybe you build up, and maybe Starrcade 97 is Bret Hart versus Hogan, as the Bret Hart's finally reached the top of WCW.
And Bret could say things like, "You ducked me in '93. You made up excuses. You made up, you were scared of me, so you pulled your usual crap and ducked me because I can out wrestle you because you're terrible." Like that kind of thing. Bret could be
You went running from the company in 93 because you didn't want to face me. I arrived here, you went running to the NWO, and you didn't want to face me. And now you've got no choice. You have to face me.
Yep. You know that I can out wrestle you. Everyone in this company knows you suck, and I'm going to prove it in Washington, D.C. at Starrcade. I'm going to out wrestle you. I'm going to humble you. I'm going to break you, and I'm going to be the WCW heavyweight champion. I'm going to save this company, and you are going to be a failure. So it could happen. It could happen. But you said something a few moments ago that actually I'm thinking about, and that is there's even a chance that Sting goes to Vince and says, "This place sucks. I'm going back to WCW. This place sucks. This place is a mess." If this guy is your main event guy and he's sitting here causing havoc in this company because he's a big spoiled brat, fuck him. And, Sting may just tell Shawn, you're a piece of crap and know nothing about wrestling, and you're going to destroy this company. I hope you're happy. And Sting goes back to WCW. And it may be a change in the Monday Night War at that point, So there's a lot of variables, Dave, a lot of variables in those two scenarios, because not only do we have to talk about the WWF with Sting, we're talking about WCW without Sting. And if the landscape in the WWF in 96, 97, even without the Bret Shawn drama, is still a mess because Shawn was just finding drama everywhere he went. Sting may be like, you know what? To hell with this place. If this guy's running your company, not you. I'm done.
Yeah.
And who knows what Sting does? Sting may just take time off. Sting may take time off. He may not go back to WCW. Maybe he holy crap. Maybe Paul Heyman goes to him and says, want to have a little fun?
Oh.
So who knows?
An extreme Sting.
Extreme Sting. Sting, the clean-cut guy, getting a lap dance from Come On, I Want to Lay Ya. Could you imagine? Sting's there instead of Tommy Dreamer with Come On, I Want to Lay Ya, and McBeula, and says, I'll take them both. It's like that. Could you imagine? That'd be totally ridiculous. Anyway, I think the one thing again tonight, Dave, this is one of the reasons I love doing this show with you, is because I think this is like the fourth time since we've done this show that we have found future show topics from a current topic. because now we're talking about, I think Bret Hart is the one most affected in all of these Sting scenarios. And I think that's a great episode on how to flip the script. And if Bret goes to WCW in 91, as was the rumor, or Bret goes to WCW, not in 97 after Montreal, but goes in 96 after losing to Shawn at WrestleMania 12. So we just found ourselves a new episode. So there's there's our take at 1996, 97. It's a very broad brush. They could go a lot of different ways with it. A lot of different ways. And we may be wrong. I mean, it could be, anything could happen. But then again, since it didn't happen, we could speculate all we want. So the last one, Dave, the last scenario is a wonky one. It's fascinating, but very wonky. Go ahead and set the table.
So again, in the research, I discovered Steve Borden doing an interview where he actually talked about the fact that he was offered a contract in 2003 by WWE. WWE were chasing him in 2003 to come to the company and to feud with Stone Cold. Now, the only thing that I can think of is time period wise, that would have to be a build up to WrestleMania 19, and right. have Sting face Austin rather than The Rock, because post WrestleMania, as we all know, Austin retires. Austin gives it away due to the build up of the injuries and various things that have been going on in his life at that time. So this was the one that caught me out. I had never heard this one before. I'd never been aware of this rumor. I know there was always talk and hope that sort of maybe he'd come in the Invasion, or maybe he'd come sort of in that post-Invasion 2002 time period. But I'd never heard this idea that he was offered a contract in 2003. And so it got me thinking, what might it have looked like? Like, how do you do that? If you're going to bring Sting in to feud with Stone Cold, how do you do that? And I was looking at the time period. So we've got to take Rock and Austin aren't going to make. Hollywood Rock can still be in the company. Hollywood Rock can do all sorts of things. He was a mayor, and you don't want to lose Hollywood Rock. So Rock can be facing anyone. It doesn't matter who. He would make it work. If we look at if we look at Austin, that early '03, this was the whole time period of the storyline that built up just before The Rock was Bischoff having been threatened by Vince, and so Bischoff is trying to re-sign Stone Cold, and then you have that karate fight thing happen at No Way Out. The Bischoff Austin encounter. It wasn't really. I think it was technically billed as a match, but it was nothing more than Eric Bischoff getting tossed around for a couple of minutes.
Correct.
So I was thinking to myself, well, if you were going to bring Sting in, I think the way to bring him in would have been as I think the most appropriate way to bring him in would have been to bring him in as an ally, some form of ally to Eric Bischoff. But Sting is a babyface. Sting has always been best as a babyface. So I see it as maybe the unwilling ally. What I'm picturing maybe is that at No Way Out, Austin turns up to face Bischoff, and maybe he just turns up. And during the course of No Way Out, it gets revealed that Bischoff has not only signed Austin back, but he has signed Sting to the company. And Sting appears. Maybe he appears on the rampway, maybe he appears in the ring, maybe he appears and chases off. The two of them get into a fight, whatever. But over the next couple of weeks, I don't think Sting would even do any talking. I think you generate this idea that Bischoff has signed Sting to a contract, and it's almost that you're going to do what I say. You don't have a choice. Otherwise, I'm going to tear the contract up. And Sting becomes the unwilling participant in this build-up, and Bischoff signs the match. Sting, you're facing Austin at WrestleMania, and they can fight Austin. Obviously, being Austin runs in, he stuns Sting. Maybe it happens at No Way Out. He runs in, he stuns Sting because that's who Austin is. And that lights the fire. Sting got stunned. He's going to battle Austin. He's going to take it on, but he's never talking. And it's still very much the unwilling participant in Eric Bischoff's games. And we build to this match, Austin and Sting at WrestleMania. We know it's Austin's last moment, and I truly believe Austin would put Sting over in the ring. But I think Sting is playing the tweener. He's not going to be full on heel, because at the end of the match, I think they shake hands. And Bischoff comes in and he's furious. What are you doing? You can't do that. It's just not appropriate. And Sting drops Bischoff then and there, making him a full-fledged face. Mm-hmm. And then he basically then moves into a battle with Bischoff on Raw. And it becomes almost Sting, Eric Bischoff versus Sting on Raw. And Sting probably is going to have some battles with Hunter. He probably goes into a series of matches with Hunter, and then we're saved from the Kevin Nash Triple H matches that put us all to sleep. Yeah. Maybe Sting goes in there because Austin comes in as the sheriff. Maybe Bischoff is trying to put it over and make Sting wrestle scrub after scrub, and then Bischoff is in as the sheriff, and he signs Austin to face Triple H. And so maybe we get two matches against Triple H. Hunter probably does everything he can backstage to keep the belt. Whether Sting gets a run, I'm not saying it happens at this time, but it really becomes that Sting is the de facto middle guy between the Austin and Bischoff battle, and then Sting sort of, after he battles with Triple H, he probably siphons off and has battles with your Kanes and your Booker T's and your various guys on Raw. And maybe we get the rebuild, and it's over the course of the year we start to rebuild Sting, and then maybe at Royal Rumble, it's not he who shall not be named on this podcast who wins the Royal Rumble, but maybe it's Sting being pushed back to the top to finally overcome Triple H at WrestleMania and claim the title that he's, the big gold belt that was his previously, and Sting goes on to have his time in the sun, finally overcoming Triple H's antics.
So your scenario has, I love everything up through the Austin Bischoff WrestleMania stuff. After that, it sounds like you would like to keep Sting on Raw and have Triple H and have Sting deal with Evolution.
Yes.
Clarify to me again where Goldberg fits in all this.
Goldberg, he has his little deal with Rock. And then, like I said, Sting sort of, I think Sting loses to Hunter at, they have their two-headed match rather than Nash, and Sting loses. Hunter then goes on to deal with Goldberg, and Sting battles. I think he just then sort of wanders aimlessly. I honestly feel he just wandered aimlessly through the roster for a few months. And then when you come out to the end of the year of 93 and you move into 03 and you move into 04, I think you reheat him then at the Royal Rumble, and instead of He Who Shall Not Be Named winning the Rumble in 94, Sting wins the Rumble in 94 and builds up again to meet.
You mean 04?
Triple H. 04, sorry, 04. And meet Triple H at WrestleMania that year, as Goldberg's run at the top is finished, and Goldberg finishes his. Goldberg, basically, his storyline remains unchanged, except he has an ally in Sting, and so Sting's got his back, and you have some backstage sketches, maybe a couple of tag matches, but I don't think Goldberg's trajectory changes. He does Rock, he goes through Hell in the Cell, beats Hunter, loses it back, and then he's dealing with Brock as he did. And I think Sting takes the place of Nash, has a couple of main events with Hunter, goes through some other guys for a few months, and then at Royal Rumble, we reheat Sting up because Sting's proven his loyalty. He's proven he can do it. He's a company guy. He's done everything he's been asked, and now it's time the fans are clamoring for it, and let's put him over, and he gets the rematch finally. I think the final rematch against Hunter where he wins the belt, and perhaps maybe the way he doesn't beat Hunter the first time is that Evolution start getting involved, and so you siphon him off, and he's battling a Batista, and he's battling a Randy Orton, and he's battling a Ric Flair, and battling a couple of other guys, completely sidetracking him, and then we deal with all that. Now I'm coming for you, Triple H.
So you don't have Sting go to SmackDown and deal with Kurt or Brock or anything like that, or Eddie or any of that. You leave that alone.
I think the natural storyline would be the initial stages. He's dealing with Bischoff. Maybe after he battles Triple H, he does go to SmackDown. Maybe you send him to SmackDown. He battles some guys there, but when he wins the Royal Rumble, maybe he comes back to because he gets to choose who he's going to face. So maybe we just get that Benoit storyline where he chooses to come back and face Triple H again rather than Kurt or whatever. I think it'd be good to see him on SmackDown. I honestly think that latter part of 04, you could have him jump to SmackDown for a while. You could have him doing all sorts of things. I just don't think they're going to put the belt on him until he wins the Rumble.
Okay. I like Sting winning the 04 Rumble. That's kind of cool. In Philadelphia. I think that's kind of neat. And then you have Sting Triple H in the main event at WrestleMania 20. And then, of course, Triple H will have to say he wants his win back, so that's when he beats him at WrestleMania 31. So there you go. So I like that, Dave. I don't even want to touch that because I think you're right. Unlike 2011 scenario where I think Sting would be better suited on SmackDown, 2003, I don't think he would fit in the scenario with Brock and Kurt and Eddie, and there's good symmetry there that leads them into 04. 03, I agree with you. I think Sting, Sting loses the two match. You have the schmaz match at Judgment Day, and then Sting loses to Triple H at Hell in a Cell, and then Triple H wins, or Sting wins the Rumble, and Sting goes to Triple H and says, "You thought you got rid of me, huh? You thought you were through with me last June at Bad Blood. I'm back." And Sting gets the win at WrestleMania 20. And then after that, maybe at SummerSlam, if you keep the belt on, see, this is what I would do. I'll say this, Dave. I would keep the belt on Sting all the way through the spring and summer of 2004, just like you did with Voldemort.
Yep.
Except at SummerSlam, he doesn't lose it to Orton. At SummerSlam, we get Sting and Shawn.
Oh, that'd be good. Yeah.
So, and then you could drop the belt down the line, and then we don't have that crappy Orton Triple H shit at the end of 2004 and all that other stuff. And you're still building Batista. You don't.
Yeah.
Sting doesn't get in the way of that. So
no, and see in 2003 after the Triple H run, he can be doing things like at SummerSlam and at Survivor Series, he can do cross promotional matches. He can face a Brock or a Kurt Angle or a whoever you want, an Undertaker. You could have a match against someone from the other roster, or he gets involved in a Survivor Series match where he's on Team Raw versus Team SmackDown, or maybe something like that. That you could do that, and then after he loses the belt on Raw in late 2004 or whatever, transition him over to SmackDown. Then he can have matches with guys on SmackDown. Then he can go through that side of things, and then move him into the part-time role.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that earlier. Move him into the part-time role and have him still putting over young guys, and maybe every now and then you build it up. Imagine Sting versus Edge on Edge's rise up the card.
Yeah.
Imagine imagine him facing a Batista or a Batista as a heel or a Cena. I mean, the battle of the ages, the previous franchise versus the new franchise at WrestleMania, Cena versus Sting. Instead of maybe Cena versus Shawn or Cena versus Hunter, you have him wrestle Sting one year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that works out fine. So if that did happen in 2003, I think that'd be nothing but good for WWE. I think it'd be bad for, Sting pretty much took all that time off anyway. Like, he doesn't really go to TNA till 2005, I think. So he took all that time off regardless.
Mm.
So, I mean, TNA could still, he may never go to TNA, or maybe he hangs around until 2007 and then decides, yeah, all right, I'm good. I think I'm good here. And then
I think like everyone, he probably hits the point like a Foley. Okay, I've done my thing. I've done my time. Maybe he starts having that personality clash with Vince. So I'm not liking the direction, or maybe he's not liking the direction of the company, or maybe the reality is probably just not being used as much as he wants. And it's like, my contract has expired. I'm going to go and try the other guys out now.
And at that point, I think Vince would be fine with it. They've done so much, and he's done enough, and now we have all this young talent. You got to start working these young guys in.
Doors always open, Sting. You can come back anytime.
Anytime, exactly. Wow. We really, that was. I didn't think we were able to pull all that off, but I think the scenarios were all really good. I think we gave Sting a lot of fun stuff to chew on. But boy, those 1991 and 1996 scenarios, woo! I think we came through the other side of a black hole. That's how deep we went. But I think we found some other topics for the future, Dave, because I think in both cases, in the 1991 and 1996 cases, you're exactly right. The guy most affected if Sting came here, I think, is Bret Hart in both cases. So something to think about for the future. Well, that'll do it. I hope everyone enjoyed this awesome episode of Through the Looking Glass. Dave, where can everyone find you?
You can, as always, you can find me lurking through Facebook. Hit me up, send me a message. Would love to chat to you. Let us know your thoughts. You can also hear me over on the North South Connection side of the Court of Pods. I'm involved with the No So Monthly. So one of the crew that brings you each month brings you one match from a pay-per-view. Of course, all those matches come together from things. So the most recent episode drop was WrestleMania 3 just last week. So go check it out. I had the opportunity to review the Can-Am Connection versus the Magnificent Morocco Bob Orton opening match from WrestleMania 3. It was good fun. So go check it out. There's a lot of all different views. It's always a good listen. How about you, Scott? Where can people touch base with you and hear you?
Everywhere on this planet. No, I'm just kidding. Seems like it, right? You can follow me on Twitter at Scott C. Podfather. Obviously, I'm also on Facebook. I'm on the Place to Be page, the Place to Be Nation page. Most importantly, please follow us on Twitter, the brand at PTBN Wrestling. We do the wrestling time travel. I got to hook you up with that, Dave, because you're not on Twitter, so I got to show you that. Every day, of course. Well, this past weekend I had some issues. I couldn't post it, but every day I try to put what major shows happened on this date in history. WWF, WCW, NWA, ECW, New Japan, and is that all of them? I think so. New Japan, WCW, New Japan, WCW, ECW. Oh, and Impact. So, and all the and see, what, thinking back at it. Oh God, today was this. Wow. So we try to do that. We always have great pods here on the PTB Wrestling Network. We are obviously the new pod that dropped earlier this month. We're going to have a fresh pod coming up in March, the Pod of Honor. Myself, Steve Willie, we talk about some of the greatest moments and some of the greatest matches in the history of Ring of Honor. I love our topic I hope you enjoyed our first episode earlier this month where we talked about the early matches in ROH history in 2002, 2003, and 2004. We have a very great topic for the month of March. Even though he passed away at the end of January, we're going to honor Jay Briscoe with our next episode, so stay tuned for that. That'll drop on March 7th. So that always drops the first Tuesday in March. So Tuesday, March 7th, we'll drop the newest episode of Pod of Honor. Of course, Place to Be Podcast, Place to Be Nation's main event, the NWA Saturday Special, all the great shows. Listen to them all. Placetobe.podbean.com. They drop on Twitter. They're on Facebook as well. And of course, they're on Podbean. And all, of course, your podcatchers, whether it is Amazon or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just check us out. We're here for you. We are the fans feed, absolutely free. We don't charge. We don't have ads. We're just here for you because that's what we do because we love talking about it. Have a wonderful month of February. Dave, it is always a pleasure. Stay cool. You stay cool. I'll stay warm.
And you stay warm.
Exactly. You stay cool. I'll stay warm. And have a wonderful rest of February. And we will talk to you in March through the Looking Glass.